Guys, welcome back to another edition of Football with Flags. Matty Ice here with you. Thanks again so much for joining us. Today we've got another Road to the Knockouts feature, this time including Group C, which consists of Argentina, Mexico, Poland, and Saudi Arabia. And I really do feel like this is a very interesting group, just in terms of the draw, the teams that are in it, and some of the matchups that we could see, and just the potential results with it as well, even though it seems like this group seems pretty easy to predict on paper. Still a lot of unpredictability and things that could potentially happen. So let's go ahead and dive right into it in terms of each team and what we could see from them. All right, we'll go ahead and start it off with Argentina coming in. Now, their schedule, they've got Saudi Arabia to kick off, which I think is really good for them. I think for some, maybe potentially they feel like it could be bad if they kind of play down to their level. But for me, I really do feel like just getting started off on the right foot for pretty much any South American side is just a huge weight lifted off their shoulders, and mentally kind of really gets them recharged and even more focused into the competition. So I think that for them, that's really important. I do feel like their magic number is 9. I really don't feel like this team should concede any points to any of these three teams. I think that they're going to face some really good competition. But I do still feel like that this team should be able to win each of these three games and handle this group and get out on top fairly comfortably. I wouldn't say it's going to be a cakewalk or anything like that, but they should be able to do so. Now, one of the things for this team that I'm a bit concerned about is kind of correcting their defensive mistakes that they had in 2018. Again, it wasn't that this team necessarily just had so many goals scored against them. It was the fact that in some really key pivotal games that they just kind of lost their focus and really allowed things to open up and get kind of taken over in terms of their defense and getting some really tough goals scored on them, especially considering that 3-0 loss they had to Croatia, where they pretty much just kind of lost it, I believe, in the second half with that team. And it came down to them beating Nigeria, I believe, in the last game of the group to be able to advance because, they had tied Iceland. But for me, I do feel like that this team is in much better shape than they were back then. Now, again, we did see that team play in 3 different formations in their 3 group stage games, and I think there was a lot of tension and just uncertainty and disappointment considering how they played in the group stage. And ultimately, I think that's why it resulted in them conceding 4 goals and losing to France in the round of 16, even though they played one heck of a game and almost came out on top and even had potentially some chances to tie that game there late. I think Aguero had a header or something that was pretty close to make it 4-4. But, for me, I do think one of the biggest focal points is how much Messi's going to be able to contribute. I don't think that this is the same Messi that we'll have seen in 2014. But again, you remember he only did score 1 goal in 2018. And I do feel like he's still going to play a huge presence in this team and how far they are able to go, especially considering this may be his last opportunity in a World Cup. But, for me, I do feel like that even though Argentina's got plenty of attacking power all around him as well, I certainly hope to see him contribute more so than maybe some people are believing that he can. So, I do think that this group opens up that possibility for him to score multiple goals in the group stage and really go into the knockout feeling confident. But, again, we'll have to wait and see how everything plays out. But with that, we'll go ahead and move on. And right into Mexico. Now, this team for me is so intriguing, especially being from the United States myself and watching this team more often than most others around the world. Getting to see Mexico, considering how much they get to play the U.S. I feel like that this could be a very good group for them. It still doesn't mean that round of 16 hump is going to get any easier, especially considering they could play France if they do get out of it in second place. And even if not, Denmark could potentially win the group. You'd have to feel they're the second best favorites to do so. So that's not going to be any easy task either. But I do feel like that game against Poland is going to be so crucial in terms of whether they're able to make it out or not. And again, like we've said, I think a lot of people are really thinking it's going to come down to Mexico and Poland in terms of who's going to get that second place spot. But for me, I do feel like 5 points for them is a really good bet to potentially make it out of the group. And honestly, I feel like I could have put that number even higher. I'm just kind of maybe putting at the bare minimum of potentially what's going to help get them out of the group. And I could see that with a draw against Poland. I could see with a draw against Argentina and certainly a result against Saudi Arabia. that Poland game could certainly see 5-6 goals put in. And I think that kind of game is very similar to the one we might see with Ecuador and Senegal, just in terms of there's a lot of good players out on the field. I think the game's going to be open. There's going to be a lot of anxiousness, but excitement as well. So it could see, that game open up and see a lot of attacking opportunities. But we'll have to wait and see. I still do feel like even though they might not beat Poland, they might take a draw or even potentially lose, I feel like they're going to play very well against Argentina. And we've seen Mexico be able to do that in the past with some really tough opponents in the World Cup. We saw how well they played against Brazil in 2014 and, how much Ochoa helped with that performance as well with some of the incredible saves he had. But then again, they played Netherlands incredibly well and very well should have gone on to the quarterfinals had they not had that penalty called against them. And then again, we see them beat Germany in their opening match in 2018. So I really do feel like Mexico is going to be up for the challenge, and I think for their fan base and their players, this is so exciting. The fact they get to play Messi and potentially and more than likely his last World Cup, and the opportunity to hopefully even beat him as well is going to be very exciting for them. So I think this team is going to play probably their best game against them. I'm not saying that they're going to play poorly against Poland or Saudi Arabia. I just think that this team's going to take it up a notch when they go against them because they seem to do that when they play even better competition, not just the United States or somebody else in CONCACAF that they feel like could potentially dethrone them, but certainly some European and South American powerhouses that they really would like to go up against and prove themselves. For me, though, I feel like their matchup, like I said, could be very difficult. And also the fact that this team is kind of going through a bit of a different streak in them in terms of, their veteran leaders, but also some youngsters that have the inexperience. And we haven't seen this team be quite as consistent or as dominant in their region of the world either as of late, especially considering they finished second behind Canada in qualifying. They lost 2 finals to the U.S. here in the last couple of years as well. But we'll have to wait and see. I really feel like Mexico still has a good chance to get out of the group. I think 5 points could do it. Certainly, I think they could score even more. But it will also be intriguing to see if they go with maybe a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 in terms of how they go out in this competition. So for me, I feel like those are 2 potential formations that we could see with this team. But we'll have to wait and see what they come up with in terms of how they're going to look come November. Now, moving on. We've got Poland. And again, right back to the same story here against Mexico and what they're going to be able to do with that team. I do feel like that a loss to Argentina for them could still mean that they could advance. I really do feel like this team could beat Mexico. But again, like I said, I think Mexico could equally do the same, or we could just see a draw between these 2 teams and it's 3-3, something crazy like that as well. So I think that's going to be maybe the most intriguing matchup out of this entire group. Even though Poland and Mexico get their shot with Argentina, I think it's going to be very intriguing to watch how that game plays out. For me, I think 6 points for Poland's kind of got to happen. I think if they score any lower, then they potentially might lose out on that, especially considering if Mexico kind of have their way with Saudi Arabia and they struggle or some different, maybe how they even play and finish up against Argentina, goal differential could come into play. And I think if that's the case, Mexico gets the better end of it. But that's just my opinion, at least here in the early going. I do feel like, though, that Poland still has a great chance to get out of the group. 6 points could certainly do it. I could see them beating Mexico, beating Saudi Arabia, then maybe struggling with Argentina. Big question for me, though, is how much can Lewandowski carry the load? And it's not so much that I want to see him be able to do that much. Certainly I'd like to see him put on some incredible performances and score some incredible goals. That way we have highlights to watch for years to come. It's just a matter of, even though we want to see these stars perform, this is still a team game, and this is still a competition that's going to require guys to step up in positions that maybe they're not always used to doing so. So for me, I think seeing how other guys can match around Robert and help out is going to be very important. But we'll have to wait and see. I could see this team in a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-1-4-1. I think the 4-1-4-1 for them could really help bring a lot of balance, and I think that that's what this team really needs. They do have some really solid attackers to help out along with Robert, but at the same time, I think this team can get caught defensively in some tough positions as well. They do have an interesting goalkeeper battle that you would think Szczesny and Fabianski are obviously the 2 to claim that spot. but I do feel like that, both of those formations are good for them, but I think a 4-1-4-1 could potentially maybe be the best. We'll have to wait and see what they choose. But see, still a lot to be decided for Poland. Very interesting that they got into this competition. Remember, they beat Sweden to advance in that playoff, so it's good to see them back. But we'll have to see if they're up to the task of being able to advance out of the group with 6 points, and if not, if they're even able to do it with less. But we shall see. Now, moving on, final team in the group, we've got Saudi Arabia, who are going to have to go up against the mighty South Americans of Argentina right off the bat, and that is going to be very difficult. Again, I think the magic number for this team, though, is kind of similar to Qatar. I think that 3 points could potentially get them through, but they're going to have to see the other teams beat up on each other, like Poland and Mexico, and defeat one of those two, while Argentina just goes and takes claim over everybody in the group and scores 9 points. It's going to have to happen that way, in my opinion. Now, again, we did see Saudi Arabia beat Egypt in 2018. However, for me, though, I think one of the biggest storylines for them is them being able to keep games low scoring. Now, when they were able to do that in their 2 games, they only lost to Uruguay 1-0, played pretty well in that game, didn't have a lot of chances, and Uruguay dominated pretty much that entire game and could have easily scored more goals, but they didn't. I think them keeping low scoring games, 1 and 2 goal games, is the only way they're going to be able to make it through. Any more goals go in, I think that it could really be difficult for this team to keep up in terms of just being able to produce that many good scoring opportunities and finish those as well. And that's no offense to them. It's just I don't think that against some of the teams that they're going to face in this group that's totally possible, even if some of these teams are lacking, some defensive stability. But they still could. And again, I think each of these 3 teams that they're going to be facing are having some defensive struggles and potentially could continue to do so. So Saudi Arabia might be able to take advantage of it, but considering the attackers they're going up against, it's going to be very difficult to do so as well. For me, though, I feel like that this team's going to have to keep games low scoring. Like I said, the fact that they're facing world-class attackers is going to be very, very difficult when you're going up against Messi and Lewandowski, and then some of those guys from Mexico as well that are going to be very hungry to continue to score many goals and look to produce a lot of good scoring chances as well. But again, reverting back to that, as far as them keeping games low scoring, you remember they lost to Russia 5-0 in the World Cup opener in 2018, and that really kind of all went downhill as soon as that second goal went in as well. So for me, I feel like that they're going to have to play in a 4-5-1. That's what they played in all 3 of their games in 2018. Now, again, they could have changed some things up here recently. Obviously, that was 4 years ago, so things could obviously look much different, but I think a 4-5-1 for them could really be beneficial. And again, they pretty much stuck with it, like I said, throughout the entire group stage. I mean, they got beat 5-0 with a 4-5-1, and then they turned around and in their final game, they beat Egypt 2-1 with a 4-5-1. So they can still look to get those wingers and guys, out on the touchline forward and get involved with the attack. But, again, I think that this team, just like we've seen some of the other ones, lower ranked teams in the group, they're going to have to defend very well and with a lot of numbers, communicate as often as possible and not really have any mix-ups in terms of losing, runs and tracking numbers wherever they go. And then, again, just take advantage of the opportunities when they can potentially seize them. But we'll have to wait and see for Saudi Arabia. It's going to be very, very difficult. But I think that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for us here in this Group C Road to the Knockouts feature. You guys let me know who you think is going to get out of the group, and let me know with all the groups that we post as well, who you think is going to get out, or even any other comments you might like to add, or some different information is certainly appreciated, and we'd love to hear it. But that being said, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And until next time, guys, peace out.